All right, take it away, Diane.
Okie dokie. So hello, everyone. Again, my name is Diane Ifkovic. I work at DEEP. I am the state's National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator, or NFIP. And I'm here today just to talk about a new action item that Sustainable CT has added to their very long and extensive list that you may be interested in. So I guess you go to the next slide. Okay. Okay, so new action item is 5.9. It's under category 5, which is dynamic and resilient planning. So there's many items under that, but this is a new item that was added in the 2023-2024, I guess, cycle, whatever you call it, what Sustainable CT says. And it's basically very simple. It's if the community participates in the National Flood Insurance Program's community rating system. So participation means you have to be rated from a class 9 to a 1, and we're going to go over that in a minute. And if you do participate, it's as simple as this. You get 20 points if you apply for it annually under the Sustainable CT program. So you don't have to really do anything more than that. Okay, next slide. So, but then you do have to participate in the community rating system. So what does that mean? So it's a little bit more convoluted now. So it is a subset of the National Flood Insurance Program. It's like a subsidiary, like kind of tack on program, the community rating system. It's voluntary. You don't have to do it. So I just want to mention right now too, every town in Connecticut, and we're one of the few states that are like this, participates at least in the National Flood Insurance Program. You all have flood maps. You all have some kind of regulations or ordinances that deal with flooding. And the state has a building code too that deals with that. So you're at least at that level. So then this is like the next level is this CRS program. So this program is managed by FEMA and also ISO or Verisk, that company. So if you know about your town's fire rating and the points, that's the same people, those ISO people. And it's kind of similar to that, you know? So basically what it does, it rewards communities who are doing more than the minimum in floodplain management. And when all these points are added up, then property owners who have flood insurance will get a discount through the community rating system. Next slide, Kate. So there are a total of you'll see it, there's more categories than these four, but these four categories contain 19 activities that the town can do. Not that you have to do them all if you participate in this program. It's kind of a laundry list or the Chinese food menu where you're picking out, you know, what you want to do. So I'll give you the very first one. It's public information. So that's things like helping residents look at flood maps, and you have to record when you help them. Outreach, so that could be newsletters, maybe you do to homeowners, like little you know, flyers, things that may be fairs, stuff like that. The state's real estate disclosure, that's mandatory anyway, is in there. The next one is mapping and regulations, series 400. So things like open space. So if you have a lot of dedicated open space, in other words, deed restricted open space, and it's in the floodplain, you get credit for that. Things like higher regulatory standards, stormwater management. I know a lot of you are doing MS4 things, so you would get credit for some of that. The next one, 500 series, flood damage reduction. Again, acquisitions, elevations, that might be more coastal towns, but definitely one is drainage system maintenance. I know every town in their public works is doing drainage system maintenance, but it's more just the documentation behind that. The last one is flood preparedness. So that has to do with dams and levees and warning systems. So if you have high hazard dams in your town, again, you might be part of a warning system. You might get some points for that. That's more, maybe falls under your emergency management director. So the state does get automatic credit for a couple things. Our state building code, our state dam safety program, which is accredited. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, our real estate disclosure, if you ever look at the standard real estate disclosure that everybody has to fill out when they sell a house, there is a question there on floodplain. Now, again, does the person fill it out correctly? That's neither here nor there. But the point is you get points because it's on there in this program. And then the other one that usually everybody gets is because every town is part of either a regional or a standalone hazard mitigation plan through their COGs, their councils of government. Some towns do have standalone plans, but most of them are regional. So you, because you participate and it's an approved FEMA plan, you're going to get points for that. So there's some small amount of points that every town would get. Okay. You can go to the next slide, Kate. So this is how the points shake down. And again, this is the CRS points. I don't want to confuse you with the sustainable CT points because it's kind of a similar thing. So you're kind of doing two different programs. So in this program, like I said, every town in Connecticut starts at a class 10 because that's just basic participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. So then when you elect to do CRS, then you're going into these classes, 9, 8, 7. I only highlighted 9, 8, and 7 because that's, and you'll see it in a second, every town in Connecticut that does participate, and we only have 14 towns, is one of those classes. It's very hard to go to the, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. There might be a couple nationwide, but not too many. It's difficult. But again, you're going to do some of those activities that we just discussed in the last slide. You're going to add up your points, and then it falls into these categories: 5% discount, 10% discount, 15% discount based on your class. I wrote the savings on the side. It's usually 50 to 100. I have a thought that that's probably a little higher now. The premiums have gone up. It might be more like 100 to 250-ish. But that, again, is our average. It's not, again, every policy is going to be different. If you're paying $10,000, and you're getting a 15% discount, it's going to be different. So everybody's policy is a little bit different, but that just gives you a ballpark. Okay, next slide. So these are the towns that currently participate in CRS. You can see them, again, I'll just read them quick. And then I also wrote, so the class 8 class, with the number, that's CRS, and then the number, the little letter in the parentheses afterward, I went through and figured out what you were under the sustainable CT, bronze, silver, gold. That's how they do their classification. So you can see if you are one of these towns. I saw Mary Rose Palumbo from Milford. I saw your name there, so you know where you are here. There might be a few other people who are already on this chart. So I'll just read them off: East Lyme, Fairfield, Guilford, Milford, New Haven, Norwich, Newtown, Stamford, Stonington Borough and Town, which are separate because they have separate zoning, Stratford, Trumbull, West Hartford, Westport. I highlighted West Hartford because they were the only town in this most recent cycle in April who actually applied for these 20 points. So Milford, I'm looking at you, Mary Rose. You didn't apply. Next time, apply for your free 20 points. So again, if you are one of these towns, you're getting free 20 points if you apply for it because you're in CRS. Okay, so just don't leave it on the table, because if you're trying to improve your sustainable CT class, then this will help, obviously, if you're already doing all this stuff and you know how this is. Okay, next slide. So CRS, you could see there's only 14 towns in Connecticut that, from that last slide, that do it, and most of them are coastal towns. Why is that? Well, it's a bit of a labor-intensive program. I'm just going to let you know that. It's not a simple one and done, like you fill out a piece of paper and you're done. It's a little bit like doing your taxes every year. You're doing a lot of documentation for all those various activities you do. It can be labor intensive. So a lot of towns either are coastal towns and they feel it's worthwhile because they have a big policy count, or sometimes it's cities. So you saw Stamford in there, you saw New Haven, and it's driven by mayors. Mayors tend to like it a little bit more, just because of the nature of the mayoral government way it is set up, as opposed to, say, a selectman or a board of selectmen. So it is a little documentation heavy, a little labor intensive. You have to be organized. Again, I hear from some towns now, especially that, they've limited staff, they're losing staff, they can't wear any more hats in town. This program definitely is a good program for somebody who is kind of the town champion of this initiative, like an organizer, somebody maybe who's been around a while, who knows a lot of people, because you're going to have to go to various town departments and kind of get data and help, if that makes sense. So you have to be a good coordinator. So these are a couple quotes I've heard over the years. Again, just for food for thought. You know, it's a lot of work for only 30 people in town who have policies, or our residents don't care if they save $100. True, but the program is supposed to be more about, again, doing more for floodplain management. Again, it's been raining like crazy. And that's what, again, Sustainable CT is trying to also bolster similar programs that, you know, have resilient components. And so this is definitely one. So I hear this, but it's also something for you guys to think about on the town level. It's something maybe, again, if you're working toward a goal of kind of doing better in both of these programs. Next slide, Kate. So how do you join CRS? So again, it's a little bit convoluted, but this is the general gist of it. So your chief elected official, whoever that is, has to send a letter of like interest to FEMA in Boston. Actually Cambridge now, they're not in Boston anymore, but to the regional office in New England. The committee has to designate somebody to be the CRS coordinator. So it could be the zoning officer, it could be the town engineer. It could be whoever you want it to be, as long as it's an actual, you know, paid community official who has, again, like those town hall contacts and all that stuff. FEMA is going to conduct something called a community assistance visit, or CAV. It's really an audit. So they're going to come down and basically rip apart your files and look for, you know, how you run your flood management program, look at your permitting, how you do permits and all that kind of stuff. Usually they're going to find something that has to be fixed. So it means violations, maybe that needs to be fixed, maybe regulation changes, something. I've never seen one yet where it comes out entirely clean. So that's just, you are opening the door of the vampire. I just warn you of that. So there you have it. ISO also does an audit like later down the road. It's not maybe as extensive as, it's more auditing your, what you've decided to do in all the, you know, what you're applying for and all those activities. Then the community would, and once you go through this process and you get a kind of a clean bill of health per se, you could either enter the program in May or October. And again, overall, it usually takes a couple years to actually get into this program. Next slide. So what are you required to do? There are some definite requirements to this. First is elevation certificates, and you saw that on one of the slides. If you don't do it now, elevation certificates would be required that you require them at permitting. So a new building or something that's substantially improved in the floodplain, not everywhere. Maintain them in your files and then check them for accuracy, which is a bear every year. If you're a coastal town, V-zone certificates, dry floodproofing certificates, if it's for a commercial building, if that's what they're using to do flood protection. Annually, again, you have to submit these elevation certificates and they have to come back like with a 90% accuracy rate, which is usually, again, they find something and there's correction. So that's another activity that's a little onerous. Every 5 years, ISO is going to come and again, do a really kind of a fuller audit again of everything you're doing. Repetitive loss properties. Now, again, this more is for coastal towns than inland towns, but it could also be if you have a certain level of repetitive loss properties, you have to have a plan on how to address them in town. Usually, again, it's more for a coastal town. You're also required to maintain flood insurance on your municipal buildings, which you probably are already doing, but you have to check that. Next is calculating the area of your floodplain and the number of structures. And again, usually nowadays, this is very easy to do with GIS. It's just a quick thing you have to do. And then something called a BSEGS rating that has to do with the building code. Again, your building official probably knows what your BSEGS rating is. It's not, or the state building office would know that too. Every town has this. Next slide. So again, we've had some interest in CRS recently. Again, flood insurance rates are going up. They, you know, nothing ever comes down. Again, saving constituents money. Mayors love it, as I said. I know this seems whatever the way I wrote this, but it shows residents you're doing something about flooding and cost of insurance. But it is something in the sense of, again, it's proactive. You're trying to, you know, help residents with those flood insurance costs. And it's good floodplain management. Again, we have had a really rainy stretch. Gonna rain again today probably. So, again, mayors, town officials, elected officials, and residents are going, what else can we do about this? So here's an idea. This is a good program that will kind of organize you, kind of focus you on floodplain management, and then also, if you do well in it, save your residents money. It's also kind of a natural progression. Again, this NFIP, this is over 50 years old. It started in like 69. And again, Connecticut is one of the few states who has full participation, at least at the base level. So even though, you know, we only have 14 people in the CRS, at least we have everybody in that program. So that's something to be said, you know, compared to a lot of other states out, you know, out west. Next slide. So last one. So if you're interested in this, here's some resources. So I would first direct you to this website. It's called crsresources.org. And you're going to see, it says series 200. That's like where the application, you'd start there. That's where you do your application letter and something called a quick check. That's kind of like you could just run through that quickly and see all the activities and kind of check the box like, are we already doing this? Check. Or maybe we can do this. Or, oh, I don't want to do this at all. This is too much work. And some things are very easy, like putting a bunch of FEMA publications in your library. You could do that, easy, check. You know, even if it's not there right now. You're doing stormwater management, you're doing open space. And then maybe there's little things, you know, then there's things like, oh, we don't want to do that right now. And it'll kind of give you an idea like where you would fall in those classes, or even if it's worth it to go ahead with this. There's also on that website a tab called training and videos, and another one called other resources. You could go on there and there's people talking about the program. It give you an idea of what it takes to do the program. And then also on that website, you can look at all the activities. It has a tab. It says the one that I said, 300, 400, 500, 600, and you can look further into each one about all the different kind of sub activities under that. Okay. So if you're interested, I didn't list everything out because there's too many things to list. The other one I would say is, again, reach out to somebody maybe in an adjacent town who does participate in one of those 14 towns in Connecticut. So if Guilford was one town, say you're from Madison, maybe you want to talk to Guilford and see what their experience is, or any of the other towns, or somebody you know in one of those other towns, and see what it really means to participate in this program. Lastly, there's me. You can email me if you wanted a one-on-one meeting, one-on-one phone call, one-on-one Zoom meeting, whatever you want, in person, you know, that we could go over things in detail. If you're really interested after you kind of look at all this, we can do that. We can have FEMA come and talk about it, whatever you want. But again, I would educate myself a little bit beforehand. But there you go. You can always contact me and we can go over it in grand detail if you so desire. And I think that's all it. I think this is the last slide.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. That's a really great overview. I just want to, before we open up to questions, sort of reiterate a couple of things you mentioned earlier. Like Diane said, this program is pretty involved. CRS has a lot of steps. There are a lot of pieces that your community would need to do to get points for it with Sustainable CT. Because you've already done all that hard work with CRS and with FEMA, we want to make it easy on your end submitting to Sustainable CT. So you don't have to re-document all the stuff you've done for CRS. You just send us your current rating. FEMA has a list on the CRS page of the current communities and their class rating. You just send that in. That's it. We don't need to have all that documentation recompiled, resubmitted. We want to make that part at least easy for you. And Dane, because you mentioned also other towns, neighboring towns, communities being a great resource. If you're interested, there are other actions in Sustainable CT where your municipality can potentially get points for helping to mentor another community on a sustainability action. So if someone in a CRS community gives some tips and tricks and talks their neighbor through how to get involved, and then that town joins, you can both get points. So just to put that on your radar as well, if anyone pursues that. And yeah, that's that. So does anyone have any questions, or any Any questions, anything else? I'm gonna put that CRS resources link in the chat. We'll also send the slides out afterwards, but I'll put that in the chat. Diane, along with your contact info, if that's okay. Great. And Jeremy, I see you're on turn on your camera. Do you have a question or?
I do.
Great.
Thank you for the presentation, Diane. So I noticed that the crsresources.org site is saying that it's maintenance is temporarily paused on it. Does that mean that the information on it is still current and relevant, or should we use the link that the website refers you to?
Wait a minute, say that again? Can you repeat
There's
the
a
question?
there's a banner on the top of the CRS resources website that states that maintenance on the website is temporarily paused. And it redirects you to a different CRS site. So I was
Oh.
wondering if the information on the CRS resources site is still relevant.
Gee, I didn't even see that. Maybe they just did that. I'm sorry. I would go to wherever they tell you to go to. So maybe they're working on it. But again, if you're I mean, Milford's already in the CRS program. So you probably don't have to do anything anyway at this stage of the game. You know, I still think you could probably, if you were not in the program, you know, you were one of the non-14 towns in Connecticut over the rest, you probably could still go to that CRS.org website, just poke around, you know, and get an idea of what the activities are. And there's some videos on there. Maybe they're transferring or maintaining it. But yeah, you could go on the other website too, and I think you'd be fine.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions or anyone from a community that's looked into it, exploring it?
I would say, Jeremy and Mary Rose, do you guys, since Milford does participate, I don't know if there's any other participants, I'm looking around at the names. Do you have any thoughts on the CRS program that you'd share with any of the other people who are on here about anything I said? Good or bad, be kind.
A great question. Any lessons learned that you think would be helpful to share?
My camera's on. Hi, everybody. I kind of inherited this from my office mate who left. It is a bit of work, and it's, as Jeremy will attest to, it's kind of herding cats, getting everybody to give you the information annually. Or in this year, I think we're due for a CAV, so everybody to get the information to you. I think it's worthwhile. It's information to the citizens. It helps citizens so they can learn a little bit about what they're doing in the floodplains and how they might protect themselves better. It's a little underfunded, but it's worked out okay for us. Diane.
But it's a lot of work. I mean, it is, am I right?
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of organization of documentation.
It's significant. They're getting better about submitting just digitally, but when you used to have to submit all the paper, it was a lot of work. And I think in all the training recently, they've talked about they're going to move away from that crsresources.org page. Okay. And FEMA wants everything on their website. They're just doing it very slowly.
Yeah. Okay. But again, if you were just new to this, I don't think you could poke around on that and kind of get a flavor of what the activities are. You know, if it's things you're already doing, you're interested in doing, type of thing, just as a research. You know, I don't want people to go too far down a rabbit hole in the beginning.
The other thing they have is they have canned videos to talk about the different steps. And then usually, although they're on pause right now, they'll have two 1 hour like lunch and learns that will help you immensely figure out if you can do each of those activities.
There's also on that website like old newsletters on there. Again, like webinars you could take that you could sign up for free webinars if you really got into this and want to know what it's about. And that's all on that crs.resources.org website or wherever they're sending you to. It's on there. So again, if you really wanted to you know, if you're a person who likes videos, hit the video. If you like to read stuff, hit the tab. It just depends what it's, what you like, but at least it'll give you an idea.
Great. Any other questions, or Diane, I guess you did touch on this, but any sort of last words of inspiration if a town is interested, municipality is interested, but it's feeling a little overwhelming. I think what you said about just showing that you're doing something, I think that does resonate with a lot of community members, and just being able to say that you're working on something, you're aware of it, that can go a long way.
I mean, I'll tell you from my perspective, I think I know the towns that are doing CRS, I worry about them a little bit less because I know they are under scrutiny, they have to do all these activities that they've chosen to do. So they're a little bit more in tune with floodplain management. And again, that's why you see more coastal towns who have, you know, a greater exposure, I guess, to flooding, and have more residents exposed to flooding. But again, I think if your goal for any town, I don't care which town it is, even if you're a little tiny town and you don't have a lot of floodplain, I'm gonna say this, you can still participate in this program, maybe pretty easily, just doing a couple activities. We were trying to push smaller towns to do this a few years ago, but this was like right before the pandemic, and then of course everything fell apart. Just by doing like open space, which gets huge amounts of points, and then all those kind of free points you get, and maybe a couple little, again, those activities maybe you're already doing, and you could probably get to a class 9, like just barely. So I guess I would say that to, you know, inland towns, you might be able to do this, and with not a lot of heavy lifting, you know, of extra stuff you're having to do. But I know it also means little towns don't have a lot of staff. So, but again, I think with all the rain we've been having, and a focus on resiliency, and this program, I mean, is dovetailing into that too. It's something I would tell you to think about. You know, maybe you can do the bare minimum and still get a class 9, and it would help your residents, it would help in this program, and it might help in other things too, like grants. I know a lot of the FEMA grant programs ask if you are a CRS community, so you know, if you're looking for federal grants, so it could help in a number of ways.
That's a great point about the grant bonus. And also just to consider that even if it requires some investigation, you might already be doing things that will get you points for CRS already. Yeah. If no one has any last questions, then we can let everyone go a half hour early. We'll share the slides and the recording with everyone very soon. Diane, thank you so much for speaking and sharing. This was a great intro and overview of the CRS program.
Thanks for having me. I think it's awesome that we work to add this activity. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great afternoon.